Good evening and welcome to Gunner Shot. Today we're going to see the third part of the political military assessment of Pakistan's armed forces. And in this, it's going to be very interesting because we're going to see the new role of Pakistan armed forces. I wouldn't say a new role, the third role of Pakistan's armed forces, defending God's cause. Let's have a go. Yeah, like I said, to reiterate, we should be very clear when we talk of the Pakistan Armed Forces, we're talking of the army. The Air Force and the Navy are just handmaidens. And they're part of the system which milks the nation and hates India. I said this earlier. This is the crux. As per Stephen Cohen, there are armies which guard the nation's borders, which we've examined already. There are armies which are concerned with protecting their own position in society. We saw that yesterday. And there are armies which defend an idea or cause. The Pakistan army does all three. And today, we'll see the third one, defending God's cause. I explained to you about Pakistan's two-front situation, the Afghanistan front and the Indian front, which will never go away. Right? We'll move on from there. When it comes to protecting their position in society, I'd explained to you that there is a center of power and the center of governance in Pakistan. And army is the center of power and the state is the center of governance. And the army has progressively taken over the state of governance and dominated it while keeping the power with itself. And wars have destroyed the state, but all wars have strengthened the armed forces. And this is what we had covered till about yesterday. And then the army business empire, which actually helps in military and political control of the nation. Right? Then we spoke of the media narratives and the cognitive warfare which they carry out with. And then the power triangle. Okay. But today we're going to talk about defending a cause or an idea and basically defending God's cause. What's this all about? I mean, you have to understand it in its entirety. It's not all about Islam, it's not all about jihadism, but it's a mix of everything. Right. When Pakistan, came into being, it had no history on its birth. It had no idea what it represented, except that it was an Islamic country. No one else knew what the rest of the contours of this nation were blurred. In this period, in the initial stages, the only institution which was strong was its armed forces. Right? In fact, if you go back into history, Pakistan inherited 33% of the British Indian Army, but just about 20% of the other institutions. And the other institutions were only one part of the British government or the British institutions. Most of them were headquartered in Delhi or in India. And the offices of the institutions which they inherited were small subparts. So they were weak. Whereas the Pakistan army was pretty strong. And they simply outgrew all other institutions without any problem. The armed forces grew, the other institutions withered. And the armed forces grew from strength to strength and they dominated the nation. This is history. I mean, I'm not saying anything new. Right. Then there's this outlook of the Pakistan army and the Pakistan armed forces about India. And this is as per multiple authors. You read any author and you will come to this thing as far as the military is concerned. The common view is Hindus are not good fighters. Kashmir must be won at any cost. And there's always a clique or a gang operating with great optimism that they'll succeed. And there's this group, small group, which takes the decision to go to war. Pakistani authors have said and have explained that this clique took the nation to war in 48, 65, 71, and Kargil. If you examine them, this is what comes out. The other services, civil services, and Air Force and the Navy, and even everyone within the army, most of the people within the army were kept out of the loop. So there's this dangerous, streak in the army where a few guys can take the nation to war. And this is something we have to understand. Now, when this gets mixed with religion, it's a heavy cocktail. And then they gamble for victory. They're very optimistic because they always feel that their plan is infallible and that they'll win. Then Pakistan army has a very exaggerated opinion of itself, that it can't be defeated. And then, and probably the most important thing, the Pakistan army feels it is responsible for its ideological frontiers. Just not the territorial frontiers, but the ideological frontiers of Pakistan. So let's do a little dive into the ideological frontiers of Pakistan. There's this Indian obsession, which I think is a major part of the ideological obsession, or rather, the ideological frontier. As far as they're concerned, struggle with India is existential. There's no choice but to fight. Not repeatedly winning or not winning repeatedly is not the same as losing. They might not win, but they can't seem to be losing. They prefer to take a calculated risk and lose than be seen to do nothing. It's not feasible that a Pakistani army officer or a Pakistani armed forces officer is just sitting and waiting for something to happen from India. They will take this calculated risk against all odds. And they feel it is not worth presiding over a state which gives concessions to India. So in any negotiation, there is no way they'll yield to anything of yours. It's not worth it. It's better to resist. And as per their thought process, victory is the ability to continue fighting. They have to continue to fight, which is more important than anything else. Okay. Then there's this emergence of the ideological factor or the ideological frontier. And this is what the crux of today's discussion is. In 1949, the Pakistan state, just 2 years after independence, or actually a year and a half after independence, they had a resolution called the Objectives Resolution. In that Objectives Resolution, they declared that sovereignty belonged to Allah, not to human beings, to Allah. This is their thing. It's recorded. It was at that time that Pakistan became an actual Islamic state. Then came the next turn, 1973. They had a new constitution after, the breakup of East Pakistan into Bangladesh. And this new constitution declared Islam as the state religion. These are the pegs of the ideological frontier which came about. when you talk of Pakistan, you have to see these markers and examine the changes which Pakistan went through. Then in 1979, there was a guy called Brigadier S.K. Malik. He wrote this book called The Quranic Concept of War. And as per that, he says the Quranic concept of war is not a theory of man but of God. So it's God which is telling them what to do and teaching them what to do. And General Ziaul Haq emerged at that time as the God's appointee. He was a living incarnation of the God's appointee. कि भाई यह भेजा है special representative. Now what did Zia do? We all know, but let me put it in context just for today, for the assessment of the armed forces. No, it was Zia who enlarged the role of the armed forces from guarding territory to the guarding of the ideological frontiers. It was he who defined the ideological frontiers of Pakistan. Okay. And from here onwards, you see, the moment he did this, around 79, 80, in fact, he did it from, he started the whole story in 74 itself when he took over. From then onwards, hybrid form of fighting became the new norm in the new jihad. So you see, Pakistan already, like I said earlier, already was good at hybrid form of warfare. They showed this hybrid form of warfare in 65 and 48. But till then, it was purely a military affair or a political affair. But from this time, from Zia's time, that turned into an Islamic affair. The ideological front opened up. The hybrid form took the religious tone. That is what we have to understand. So, what is this Quranic concept of war? Let me read some experts' excerpts and people's comments to you. First and foremost, this is God's war-fighting principles and commandments which was released. So, ये भगवान का देन है, अल्लाह का देन है. Okay. Now, according to Malik, Brigadier S.K. Malik, who wrote this Quranic concept of war, the Quran is the revealed word of God as spoken through his chosen prophet Muhammad. So far, so good. It places war fighting doctrine and its theory in a much different category than Western thinkers are accustomed. So their thinking is different. Because it is not a theory of war derived by man, but of God. This is going back to the 100-year war. So this is a whole lot of thinking which is different. Now, as per him, just war or jihad is inherently spiritual warfare. So whenever the Pakistani fights, the way he fights with a spirit. It's spiritual. In the name of God. It's no more in the name of Pakistan. And I'll just come to that. How it is so. Okay? Religion, right? It is inherently spiritual warfare, religious warfare. Now here comes the thing, to strike terror into the hearts of Islam's enemies. So anyone who's not from Islam is Islam's enemy, and that chap has to be terrorized. This terror is both physical and metaphysical. Okay? So it is psychological to a large extent. Islamic warfare is intrinsically part of a cosmic struggle for the reign of Allah's will on the earth between the forces of God, that is Darul Islam, and that of Darul Harb, those who dwell in ignorance and darkness of the true knowledge of God. This is what they write. So this is also what generally Islam talks of. So here, this chap, Brigadier Malik, he synchronizes or syncretizes warfare with religion. We are talking of Darul Harb and Darul Islam. So anyone who's a non-believer has to be fought against. And in this Quranic concept of war, Malik, pins together religion and war fighting. So this is what it is. Now, in this book which he put out, Quranic Concept of War, General Zia gave a foreword. This is the foreword. He says all Muslims play a role in jihad. Jihad in terms of warfare is a collective responsibility of the Muslim Ummah. So what does Ziaul Haq do? He enlarges the scope of jihad from beyond Pakistan to the Muslim Ummah, and is not restricted to soldiers alone. It is the Ummah which has to do, just not the Fauj. General Zia's concept of Islamic military professionalism requires godly character, so you have to be pious. Now, Zia endorses Malik's thesis as the only pattern of war or approach to war that an Islamic state may wage. So, Pakistan thereafter never waged a conventional war from the time of Zia. So they are waging a jihad for everything, the Quranic concept of war, whatever you call it. Because he sanctified that this is the only way an Islamic state can fight. Okay. Now what next? In his term, Ziaul Haq did the great switch. The motto of the Pakistan army till then was Ittihad, Yaqeen, Tanzim. That is unity, faith and discipline. After this book came and after, he became the God's appointee, the motto changes. What does it change to? It's Iman, Taqwa, Jihad fi Sabilillah. So faith, piety, and holy war in the path of Allah. So it's no more, they're not fighting a normal war at all. And this is something we have to understand. And you connect it up with what I said earlier, you see logic coming in the way Pakistan behaves or its army behaves. Okay, let's talk a little more about Iman, Taqwa, Jihad fi Sabilillah. It reflects Pakistan's army's dedication to the cause of Islam. That's very clear. Now, as an extension of this, Pakistan's generals, they have built close link with Islamic groups. And in many cases, they've started Islamic groups. They've started LET and Lashkar and Jaish, Islamic groups. They not only had close links, they've started them. Ziaul Haq put together a whole lot of madrasas along the Durand line. At that time, for the Mujahideen, a lot of seminaries. Now, those chaps were either repurposed as Taliban or this side. Okay. Now, with this, what has happened? They have melded the political and the militant part of this whole story together. So now you're looking at an army which is going to fight conventional, it is going to fight political, it is going to fight militant with Islam. So now we are getting into a toxic combination. It's a toxic cocktail. And all these chaps are trained to fight a proxy war in Pakistan's interest. That's the whole story. So, actually speaking, Lashkar-e-Taiba and groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba or Taliban earlier, I mean, till it went over to Afghanistan, or Jaish, are sword arms of the Pakistan armed forces handled through the ISI that we know. Now you see the connect. Okay. Islamist militants and their jihad are vital strategic assets of Pakistan's rulers, that is the armed forces. And terrorism is an instrument of state policy. Okay. The next thing which flows out of this is jihad fi sabilillah is not the exclusive domain of the professional soldier, nor is it restricted to application of military force alone. So everything is love, fair in love and war in this. So the whole story, now you see the ideological frontier coming and fighting God's cause or defending God's cause. Now they are masters of the hybrid. We have to be alive to this. Because of this, whether it's in 48, 65, Kargil, Kashmir, Punjab, these are all classic cases of hybrid war against India. Or for that matter, the Afghanistan wars. First with Mujahideen, then with Taliban. This was classic case of hybrid war against USSR and USA, who paid them to do it. And then the third factor of this hybridity is they carry out training and export terror through their seminaries. This is all recorded. I don't have to say. Go. The Pakistani authors themselves write about all this. Okay. Then, in part of this whole story, ISI is the main tool of hybridity. And this agency is under, though it is supposed to be inter-services agency of Pakistan, it is under the Chief of Army Staff. Remember Faiz, who's now under arrest? He was called back from Afghanistan and then marched up to the Adjutant General and given a reprimand by the chief. It's under the chief. It's not under the even the PM. In fact, the whole problem, political problem of Pakistan is this: the chief just changed the ISI chief. It implements policies set by army planners. The nation doesn't have a say in it. It has a domestic and an external role. Let's be very clear. And it executes the tasks of the nation at the behest of the army. ISI enables political control of the nation. This is important. It is the arm, it's the sword arm of Pakistan armed forces. The uniform sword arm. This is something which we have to understand when we talk of the the socio-military compact of the Pakistan armed forces. Then they have proxies, ISI. The army doesn't have proxies, the Air Force doesn't have proxies, it's ISI which has the proxies. There are constant Indian-oriented proxies like LAT and JEM. And there are offshoots like the TRF, PAFF, which are coming up these days, Kashmir Tigers, name change. And then there are seasonal Afghan-oriented proxies like Taliban, ISKP, AQI. We don't know who's with whom at any point of time. And then they have the internal control through radical elements of mullahs and the TLP. The TLP is Tehrik-e-Labbaik Pakistan is today the most assertive organization within Pakistan. And it gets, freedom from the army. If the army wants, it can shut it, but it will not, because it keeps the politicians in check. And then the Muladam, which is completely under the armed forces. What is the strategy? We have seen this for 3 days. We, because they have three roles: guarding the nation, protecting themselves, and defending God's cause. So, overall, what is the strategy of Pakistan's armed forces? Let's have a look at it. Their op strategy, fundamentally, intervention in India keeps the conflict going free of cost. So, whatever today is happening in J&K, in Jammu, it keeps the conflict going. It doesn't matter them whether the 10, 15 chaps are dead or gone. They're just cannon fodder. And if they can keep the conflict going, it is absolutely at free. There's no cost to it. Then the next thing is they'll combine nuclear, conventional, and proxy capacity, so that India cannot afford to retaliate. The price of retaliation is very high from India. Their op strategy is to force India to live with terrorism and insurgency, because if we retaliate, it is tantamount. If we retaliate conventionally, we have to cross Pakistan's nuclear red lines, which they know we will not do. Why? We don't have the capacity to repay them in their own coin, because we lack that political military fusion or thinking to approach Pakistan in a different manner, the political manner. Defeat of Pakistan army, I said, is only feasible politically. You have to think politically. Never forget, Pakistan army may be poor, but the Pakistan armed forces are not poor. I would say, sorry, Pakistan may be poor, but Pakistan armed forces are not poor. They are always kept well trained and well equipped. I showed you in the first presentation how they have used Turkey, China, UAE, USA to build up their arsenal. And now they're selling ammunition to people. They have that capability. Actually, in this whole process, if you see, in the past 3 months, some grading, in international grading economically, they've gone a little up. So, they'll leverage the army for their economy also. But remember, there's a last word which I've written. They will avoid war at any cost, but the conflict has to continue. Go back to the first line. They will keep the conflict going free of cost for themselves and impose a cost on India. But they will avoid war. They have avoided war ever since 71, if you see. They have avoided conventional war on one pretext or the other. Okay. As far as the hybrid war fighting is concerned, what is it? What are the tenets of this? It will control the state. Hybrid war fighting gives them control over the state, because those chaps who can be pushed out can be trained internally also. It involves uninhibited use of terror, jihad, and ideology, which I've explained to you, the Quranic concept of war. It also involves conventional threat and nuclear saber rattling. There is a huge stress on cognitive war and narrative building, which we discussed yesterday. And alliances as a shield and technology infusion will continue, which I discussed day before yesterday. But there are eternal issues which Pakistan can never, get away from. Whatever Pakistan armed forces try, these five issues will always kill them or keep them there. India, which is the biggest issue for them. Then the Baluch rebellion, which is not going to go away. It will not go away under any conditions. In fact, it will keep going back to worse. The Pashtun problem will not go away. It can't be repurposed. You will see the complete Durand line like a jelly. Kabhi idhar, kabhi udhar, but never at peace. Economy will not recover. I've said this many times. Why economy won't recover? Pakistan doesn't have water. Its population is exploding. Their agriculture is declining. They have become a permanent net food importer. Internal radicalism has gone up. That will not go. So the Pakistan armed forces have these five problems. It is up to us to use them. Use them politically. Again, use them politically. Violence has no value in this. Political issues have value in this. What is the paradox of the army? Having said all this, and this is the crux of why Pakistan army cannot collapse. This is written by someone in Rusi, right? Royal United States Institution, Service Institutions, last year. He says there is a lot that is wrong about the Pakistan army. It interferes in politics too much. It makes bad foreign policy choices. It blocks peace feelers with India. It accounts for too much of GDP. It is too deeply entrenched in the economy. Its human rights is mixed. However, it is now the main institution which holds Pakistan together. In a country with nuclear weapons, the survival of a disciplined Pakistan army matters to all of us. This is the thinking of the West. The last line, survival of a disciplined Pakistan army matters to all of us. The West will never allow Pakistan to collapse. We need to understand this for this reason. So, in the end, after 3 days, we have to understand the Janus role of Pakistan armed forces. It is the destroyer of the nation, also the savior of the nation. The politics have no value. The people see the Pakistan army as the savior of the nation, while it is destroying the nation together. So this double face of Pakistan army is something we have to live with. We have to understand this and say this is what it is. And we need to have strategies to offset that.